The next session here I would like to introduce is a session on innovation in asset management. Super interesting topic. And to lead that panel, we have one person who really knows something about the subject. Very happy on that. So in a second, I will invite Maria Hjort on the stage here. I will leave the stage. She's the CEO at VP Securities. Earlier, you have been many years in Mercer and Danske Bank, so you really know about this subject. So I will leave the floor and let it up to you to introduce the panel. But also, while you come on here, I think you should just spend a little bit of time for the international audience to explain what is actually VP Securities and which kind of company is that. But welcome, Maria.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so just a very short introduction to VP Securities. It's also known as the CSD of Denmark, the Central Securities Depository, where we do issuance, settlement, and safekeeping of within securities. And on the panel today, I have three really interesting people. I look very much forward to hearing them discuss the subject of innovation in asset management. So on the panel today, we have Thomas Midtgaard. He's the CEO of Brickshare. We have Rupertus Rodenhuizer. He's head of sales from SDX. And we also have Omri Ross, who is the chief blockchain scientist of eToro. Thomas and Rupertus and Omri, I will give the floor to you. If you could just briefly introduce yourself and the company that you represent. Thomas?
Yeah. Well, I'm Thomas, and I'm the CEO of Brickshare. Brickshare is a investment platform that is, you can say, democratizing the access to alternative investments. We are making them available for real people, you can say, for the retail segment, so you can invest from 5,000 crowns and get access to real estate, and you get a opportunity to divest your holdings within a month. So we have created liquidity and also demolished the capital requirements that is the traditional barriers to enter into alternative investments.
Thank you. Robertus?
Yes, I'm Rupertus. Nice to be here. Thanks for the invitation. I've joined SDX as employee number 6 in September 2018. The company was founded in July 18. We are en route to build the first financial market infrastructure based on DLT technology. We have the pleasure and freedom and support of a very supportive Swiss regulator called FINMA, and the Swiss National Bank is with us in this journey as well. And we are, as I said, building a platform where financial intermediaries can tokenize, i.e. issue, trade, execute, settle, and store digital assets.
Thank you very much. And then we have Omri.
Hi, I actually have 2 positions. One of them, I work for the university as an assistant professor and leading the financial transparency group, where we focus on technologies such as DLT for increasing financial transparency. And at eToro as chief blockchain scientist. Yes, eToro is the largest social trading platform in the world with over 13 million registered users, about 1,000 employees, been around for a while. And what I do there is I lead sort of most of the work that is done around financial transparency and blockchain. Among other stuff, we support, I guess, 17 different stable coins, which run off to $500 million volume a day. So that kind of thing.
Thank you very much. So just before we start the debate, I would just like to highlight that the audience that is listening in, please feel free to ask questions. We will try to bring them into this highly competent panel. The first questions to ask is, how would you see the innovation in asset management? How would you see that develop over time? And maybe we should start, Rupertus, with you in Switzerland, because you are truly building infrastructure of the future.
We hope. Thanks, Maria. Yeah, look, basically an exchange and a CSD does not operate or create any commercial value without the necessary financial market participants connecting to the platform. There are thousands of use cases, proofs of concepts, you can name it the way you like. Fact is, every bank, and I've been seeing every bank at least twice in the last 18 months around the world until COVID stops me flying, is having some kind of digital asset, digital transformation project. Some want to tokenize their infrastructure and automate infrastructure, and they're using new technologies in order to reduce risk, operational effort, speed of transactions. The other one says, I simply want to tokenize assets which are currently unbankable and enter into a completely new space of asset classes that are currently untapped. So we always say the more complex a product launch is, the more complex price discovery is, and the more cumbersome change of ownership is for an asset, the more appealing this new technology is. And guess what? When I go to see the West Swiss private banking space, they are not really interested in tokenizing bonds or tokenizing equities, which are part of the SIX index anyway. They are asking me, when can we tokenize art? When can we tokenize property, commercial property? My customer in the asset management division owns this block of property and apartments. He wants to tokenize it, securitize it, put it on a CSD, and eventually start fractions of his asset. This is where we believe the way is going forward. Existing businesses, I call it legacy business, is going to use the platform to improve post-trade services, corporate actions, stock splits, and so on. Others are looking more into creating new revenue streams by tokenizing, securitizing assets which are currently untapped.
Thank you very much. I think that brings me on to Thomas, because you, of course, looking into tokenization of property, etc. So, Thomas, what's your view on the asset management development over time?
I agree. The tokenization of the alternative investment space is, of course, a hot topic, and it's going to be a hot topic for the coming many years. And not just because you can actually now start trading alternatives, but also because as the managers need to find spaces where they can get good returns, and there's a pull from, you can say, the investment segments, especially the retail segment, to find new returns or high returns, and also the green sustainable movement is pulling you towards that kind of investments. So given the fact that you need to find returns, and also that there is a pull from the market, you will see a tokenization. I don't know if the tokenization, how it's going to be progressed in terms of blockchain, in terms of stock markets and so forth. What we are doing, we are actually tokenizing the asset already. We are doing it via a fund setup, but we have interesting things in our pipeline, and we are actually on the way to build a stock exchange for the new 21st century, where you don't need all the costs that you see in the structures today. And you can also see that the type of data you need in order to evaluate and create transparency within that sector is something you can provide, because it's not there yet. You will see it in a traditional market where you can see stocks and bonds, you have all the information flow you need. And as you see today, many players are experiencing lower margins, despite that you see the asset placed in those type of assets is actually increasing. And that's because of the fierce competition in that area. And that's why they're pulling towards the alternative space. So I believe that you will see an innovation where you will need to tokenize, in lack of better words, alternatives. And you will see retail segment being part of that future.
And now you just heard Riptus mentioning art as an alternative besides real estate, etc. Now you're already in real estate. Could art be something that would be of interest to you going forward as a way to develop?
Oh yeah, of course. But I think
in
terms
areas.
Of sorry, wasn't me?
Yeah, it was you, Thomas.
Yeah. I think art is something that could be down the line. There is already players looking into that space. But in terms of taking some products that are more mature and part of a global agenda, you will see sun and wind be the first thing you will see after property. That's the next thing being tokenized. And then you will see infrastructure, then you will see private equity, and then you will see forests and so forth. Art is, you have seen over the last 10 years, a lot of return in that space, but you really need to be an expert, and where do you find the information on that? Whereas, when the wind is there, you can get some data. When you can see the sun is there, you have data. And then you have agreements across with the governments and so forth. So I don't believe art will be the main driver for this. It will more be like sun and wind energy parks.
Thank you, Thomas. Now on to Omri. It was also mentioned by Thomas that it's a retail segment that seems to drive part of this demand for new ways of looking into asset management. How do you see that, Omri? And I'm of course looking especially into eToro as a platform.
Yeah, but I first want to comment. I think I agree with my colleagues here discussing the infrastructure element. And I myself, as a full-time geek, work a lot in this space. But I think it's even more interesting to look into how you actually build products that generate simple values. All right, we can talk about DLTs forever and argue for it forever. I've done a lot of that. I think it's way more interesting to see how do you actually create a product that is simple to understand as create value very easily. Like we put a lot of effort, for example, on social trading because it's very simple. You can see an investor invest in sustainable investment. He can share his view about things. Actually, our CEO before actually showed a couple of our most popular investors. One of them is Danish, by the way, that actually follow that. And I think this is really exciting because the Y and Z generation are working a little bit different than the old generation that wanted to invest via Danske Bank because they believe in the value of a big whatever organization. Now people actually believe in stocks they actually take part into. And that's become a more important part. This is one thing. The second thing, I'm super bullish long-term, not short-term, about creating much more inclusive finance. This is why I dedicate my work to that. Because, we all done well, and I think I'm more interested in trying to see how we can create more inclusive finance, the same as we discuss sustainable investment. And then can we actually offer people to loan money for low interest all over the world? Can we get tokenization of assets in a regulated way to actually allow people to borrow based on them, like we all do in Denmark? So I'm way more excited about it because the infrastructure is the simplest problem, right? It's from my point of view. I think to get adoptions, we really need to see how we can pack it in a really effective way. And we spend a lot of time on thinking about it, and we've done a lot of transformations, but I'll let other people speak for a while.
Thank you. Now, you just mentioned tokenization in a regulated way, and of course, regulation is something that's super important to understand, but also to make sure that that compliance is high on the agenda, even though we're talking about innovation. And there, I think, Ruptus, maybe you can mention or talk a little bit about how do you go about regulation at the SDX?
Absolutely. The regulation is crucial. I mean, as I said, we are in a beautiful niche little country, Switzerland, where they discovered early enough that the financial market space is of core importance of the overall financial economy of Switzerland. So they want to be at the forefront of these innovation steps. And they do pretty well. If I look around, others are just waking up. And the Swiss have changed the securitization law 8 years ago. I don't think they were already then thinking about blockchain and DLT, but they did approve the dematerialization of assets many, many years ago. And this is a step that now all the big economies, Germany, France, Italy, Spain, UK, they've had to do first before they enter into the space. So it's going to take some time. I fully agree with Omri, the adoption time of digital assets is going to take quite some time. We are not in a sprint here, we are in an ultra-marathon modus. And convincing banks to find the right product for their bank, for their system, for their future growth and sustainability is key. Yeah, and this is nothing you build overnight and run it. It needs severe impact on everybody's banking infrastructure. And I talk to a lot of banks who really anticipate, well, I have failed to modernize my core banking system in the last 20, 30, 40 years. Now is the time where I can do it incrementally, step by step. I can refocus, rechange, modernize my core banking platform, enabling services to be done more automatic in a fashion where you probably need 100 people sitting in middle office and back office and synchronizing databases. So this is not going to happen overnight. It's going to take a long approach. We need partners on the journey to build it. And guess what? We are not looking into the art case because we believe it's the most sexy and promising and profitable market space. I mean, it's a niche market. If you compare commercial property globally compared to the art case, it's a dwarf. Yeah, it's inexistent. So yes, if you want to go white elephant hunting, you go for the big bucks, and those are definitely in what Thomas said in terms of property infrastructure. But look, we have one leading use case or product in our name is a bank who has a balance sheet problem. The balance is full of loans. They need to soften their balance sheet because they want to offset the credit to institutional investors who are seeking for some kind of yield pickup. So using the new technology, and yes, securitization of loans does exist. Yeah? Credit derivatives exists. But bringing those in a standardized format where institutional investors can get access into a database that has been proved to be the right database, it drops the number of costs for accessing these assets substantially. And suddenly you don't need to invest 100 million to make it worthwhile. You can actually tap into this liquidity pool and invest 5 or 20 million, which opens again a new area for small and mid-sized asset managers, family offices who do not spend hundreds of millions of euros, but smaller sizes. And this is exactly what we're building.
Thank you. So just jumping on to the next question. So what do you see as the biggest learnings or trends right now out there? And maybe Omri, you want to go first?
Sure. And this will also relate to regulation. I think it's all about this dance between creativity, regulation, and offering killer products for people. And like one of the things we see today, but is not sustainable, unfortunately, is some growth in decentralized finance, at least in our system. We see a lot of very interesting offers for a variety of products. And I think this is something that will grow, but will grow slower than it goes today. Now it's a little bit the wild, wild west. So we can't even offer it or considering offering it today for our customers, even though we would be interested in that. Another thing is we want to figure out how to integrate the old system with the new system. Unlike maybe what SDK are doing, and which is pretty cool, is we believe like it's the intranet on the internet story. Of course, the intranet is much easier to adapt. And of course, there is a lot of place for DLT system for intrabank. But this is creating more of the same. And I'm not going to spend all of my time doing that. I'm going to spend my time either increasing transparency for everybody or creating product that could be available for everybody. Which it's just my personal choice, which means I'm really thinking about how can we bring KYC in a transparent way for everybody, and how can we give access, therefore, for everybody to enter this stuff. I think VP Securities, I'm sure you are also interested in that to some level, maybe in more Nordic setup. Yeah. So I'm mainly focusing on that because this is the biggest barrier. Because if we are offering product to everybody on a public chain, so how can we offer it in a regulated ways? And we're thinking a lot about it. We don't have all the answers yet, and what people do in reality is a combination of both. So, sorry if it's not clear, but
no, it is. Thank you. Thomas, what's your comments on how you see biggest learnings and future trends right now? Thomas, can you hear me?
Sorry, need to unmute. Sorry.
Not a problem.
I'm back again. Just to briefly touch upon what Omri is telling, saying what his passion is, KYC or regulation is one of the barriers for scaling a financial tech across borders. And the real key is to find a solution across many borders in order to be able to create something that's viable in the long run. But I think that it's already in the beginning of how you should scale this in terms of regulatory compliance. I think you will also see some kind of in the future, consolidation of this space where big platforms are going to buy in across the globe and get all these compliance regulations in a standard terms so everyone can use it, which is also a part of what we need to be done in order to create access to all kind of assets for all. But in terms of just briefly, I touched upon the trends. Innovation as a management, I think it's more or less like a textbook development. Given the fact that the old ones are suddenly hit by a digital age of free information, new people coming in, people into fierce competition because suddenly you can gain access to all kind of stocks, all kind of bonds. You also see that with the free information flow, you will see with the competition, you will see a fee pressure and you will earn less. And also regulation going up, you will see the operational costs increase. And suddenly you have decreasing margins. And suddenly you see innovation in an old business. And that's a catalyst for, of course, cost cutting and what you do, automation, digitalization, so forth, looking into all these steps of creating a more seamlessly value chain where you don't need a lot of people to create the income. And also you will see product innovation, because suddenly a lot of people, or a lot of providers are competing over the same assets. So what you're going to do? Look at new assets. And that's why you see alternatives being the highest growth rate ever. We're already talking about real estate and also infrastructure becoming the mainstream going forward. I think it's around 60% of all assets, financial assets, are placed in these kind of assets, but it's 60% of the revenue streams comes from that kind of assets. And this tells you that the alternative space is already, or not already, it's not in the digital age yet, because you can earn a lot of money there and you can get a margin still. But when we cross that border into people, as Brickshare is providing that access and the data and all the information on how to do it, you will see a lot of flow going in there. You'll see a margin press there and so forth. But another thing is that I think you will see, I talked about before, the retail segment is of course also a trend you see. It's one of the largest investor groups in the world in terms of numbers, but also in terms of capital to be placed going forward. So you need to cater to that. And how do you cater to a segment like that? Because they are not professional. You need better customer experience. You need to invest in how you drive your customer service, customer experience. You need to invest in how. Am I talking too much?
No, I'm just. Yeah, maybe.
Okay. Yeah. And also how you communicate and how you educate, because as already is saying that eToro, of course, they have this social investing where you can follow and talk to each other about investments. That'll be the future. You see Public in the US doing the same thing. They had created a social investment platform which is growing at a high rate. And people that's not educated, they need education, or they need to talk in small groups in terms of, is this a good investment or not, or follow someone who actually knows what they're doing. So that kind of platforms you will see going forward.
You just mentioned that you expected consolidation among some of the larger platforms. Who could you see drive consolidation?
Well, I think there's a lot of results, because eventually some of the incumbents in the market, they need to adapt quickly to the new age. And if they have a legacy structure, how do you do it? You buy in on new technology, but also in terms of gaining access quickly into new assets, you buy new entries in the market. So it could be anything from Citigroup to maybe also eToro if they want to go into new assets and want to streamline faster.
Thank you. So Ruptus, what's your take on trends right now?
There is for sure, and I can only repeat what Thomas said. There is a huge trend in non-bankables seeking for efficiency and seeking for new revenue streams for the admin side. On the other side, Omri did a good point. I mean, you will not pass by you will not get away with the disruptiveness of business if you do not play alongside the regulators. Full point. And the more public you get and the more disruptive it gets, the more they're going to put you on a leash and they won't let you run. So it's going to be step by step. Regulators need to be comfortable with the approach you do. They want to know where the customer is, who the customer is, where the funds come from. The more you go into a public space that is disorganized and managed and not observated and regulated, they smell bad and they will stop you eventually. Don't worry. I mean, that's the way financial markets work. On the other side, I think there is a huge trend in central bank currencies being issued. I think Libra did all of us a great deal because everybody now woke up and is scared to death that somebody in the Silicon Valley takes over the financial world and runs currency and money market supply. So I think Zuckerberg and Facebook and Libra did extremely well in waking up, shaking up the people and say, look, guys, if you don't do it, we do it. So the entire trend of digital currencies combined with digital assets in order to secure trusted payments and product ownership change is definitely a big trend.
So we have actually a question coming in from the audience. I think maybe this could be for you, Amri. Will continued innovation in asset management further deepen the gap between banked and unbanked by making new asset classes available to the banked? Amri, would you have a take on that?
Excellent question.
Yeah.
And I first of all, I really hope not. I really don't know that. Of course, none of us is an oracle, but I think this is what we try to change. And I think, I would like to quote maybe one of our most copied portfolios investors, which he said, by the way, just for the fun of it, right, or the fact, he's a vegan and he loves investing in sustainable stuff, and he done amazing returns. I personally follow him, right? But the point is that he mentioned that he loves it, that he fought full-time as a popular investor for eToro, right? He decided to leave his job because he had tens of millions of dollars actually following him. And he said, I love it that I allow serving small people, or not small people, but let's call it common people, investing $2,000, $5,000, $500 at me, rather than working for a hedge fund. And, we respect working for a hedge fund. We all, part of us did it at some point in time. I think the really interesting part will be where we can see the sort of the connecting part between platform like SDK are building, right? Between the six group, really sort of fundamental old school finance people to work with more like new finance companies like ourselves that actually build infrastructure that goes to retail. And I think this will be very interesting. And I really hope that not. My wish, and this is, again, what I'm spending my time on, is either increasing transparency because it will reduce costs, a lot of the stuff that Rupert and Thomas were talking about, or working on part to actually produce new products to retail people. So I think how to educate people to use it is very tough, but I think that it's really interesting, and I hope that it will not increase. I hope that by getting access to everybody to do these assets and maybe following people, we can actually reduce financial differences. But, it's years to come and see.
Thank you. We actually have another question coming in from the audience, and this might be for you, Ruptis, and potentially even for myself. What is the role of CSDs in the new DLT-based digital asset management ecosystem?
It replaces the old CSD.
Thought you would answer that.
I think the modernized digital CSD is in fact nothing else but a technological improvement of the existing CSD world, where you currently deposit paper, bonds, stock in paper format, structured products, global notes. You carry it with a little lorry into the CSD and store it somewhere. It has to be terminated, it has to be burned, it has to be killed, whatever. A CSD for digital assets is purely sitting on a ledger and changes ownership on ledger on behalf of the bank or the financial intermediary, and lastly to the financial beneficial owner. So the CSD world is not going to disappear, and I'm not saying that the digital CSD is replacing the classic CSD in the next 20 years. You can't change a 150-year-old business just overnight, but the new way of issuing, i.e. tokenizing assets, needs a digital CSD, because you cannot cross-mix classical CSD with modernized paper or digital paper. So that's why it needs a new CSD. Thank you.
So we've just briefly touched upon some of the challenges that you see in order to truly see innovation within the management industry. So regulation was one challenge you highlighted, Thomas. What other challenges do you see? For example, Amri, what would you see as key challenges right now?
Can you clarify the question? Key challenges for what?
Yeah. So what do you see as key challenges in order to keep driving innovation and also maybe to further reach scale?
All right. I will have to continue supporting Thomas here on regulation, because it's a tough thing. First of all, let's be fair. It's really hard to be a regulator. If you regulate something and it's going to stink, everybody's going to come and point at you and say, hey, how did you do it in a great country like Denmark or Switzerland or elsewhere? And we would expect more of you. if you do a business, you operate the business and it's prosperous, you're probably not going to come to you and shake your hand and say, thank you so much for opening this door for us. So, they have a natural bias to say no for things, and they have no sort of reason to say yes for things. And which means we see a lot of these elements, and we see it a lot within the digital technology. We see how slow the US moving around it, and how fast countries like Switzerland and now Germany and also somewhat France are actually moving in this space, which is really interesting. So I think that's a big one. And I think it's a big one because it's barrier on both sides, right? You see good opportunities to offer product for retail users. Now you want to offer them fast. How do you do it? Like, you speak to the regulator and you speak to people which are way behind you in their understanding of the situation. How can they assess it? So I think it will be very interesting to understand how to create these fast tracks and maybe to make strategic investment into that infrastructure. Because just to finalize it, for me, the biggest differentiator today on financial inclusion is infrastructure. If I've been living in a country where I couldn't not even tokenize it, but in a sense, get my house into a mortgage in a respected way and non-ways, probably my house will worth less. I will not be able to borrow it for 1 or 2% a year, and I will have less residual income to use for my family. So I think if people would see this infrastructure and regulation and invest in it and innovation, it will be very prosperous. And I think most people, like myself, believe that the greatest transfer of wealth is going to be to tokenization of assets. All of the stuff my colleagues here mentioned, we also believe in it. The tokenization is the simple part, right? It's actually extremely simple to do. It's more about how you do it in a regulated way. How do you show that the art piece that I would buy from, Thomas or Roberts will actually mean that I have a stake in the Mona Lisa, and that's not mean that it's going to be disappearing. We lost this wealth, and all of this stuff require a lot of very, very strong collaboration. So I'm just seconding Thomas, unfortunately.
Thank you. Rupsus, key challenges.
You're muted.
We can. Good. There you are.
I couldn't agree more with what Jean-Louis just said. Regulation is key, but as well is the willingness of the participants to change. It is not a given that all banks do believe in tokenization, digital transformation, and the likes, because there's always a more important project. There's always a more important and more revenue promising project. Banks, insurances, financial market participants need to believe strongly in this change. And it's going to happen. It's going to happen not today and tomorrow, but as you know, people in the financial market, they think from bonus payment to bonus payment. They don't think about 5 years out, 10 years out. I mean, they're happy if they can survive the next review of their results. So in finding this true belief and support and the willingness to spend money on, because building financial infrastructure is terribly expensive. Believe me, I know what I'm talking about. I know what we cost. It's extremely expensive. And that's why it's not so many who can manage such an enormous project such as SDX, sponsored by our Mothership 6. There are just not many exchanges who can afford it. Plus, we have the freedom of a shareholder who doesn't ask us every quarter about results. We have the freedom to build and to build something meaningful, but it needs the acceptance level. And the acceptance level stops because SocGen believes they have found a solution. BNP has another solution. JP Morgan has another solution. Then I come in and says, guys, why do you have 3 different solutions? Why don't we all build one solution together? Right? That's what it needs, the willingness to understand and create a standardization, because only then you will deliver the efficiency gains you promise. Because if everybody keeps on doing this own thing, nothing's going to happen.
Can I add in?
Yes, of course.
I agree. In general terms, compliance is one of the key elements of, and also getting the regulators educated in what we are doing. I think in terms of the already established players, I don't think they're incremental for doing the change. The pull will come from the market no matter what. So if you come with a solution where people want to go, you're going to pull them towards that. And then you're going to make a standardized rules of engagement with whoever it will be, and it will come no matter what. It's not going to be in terms of 5, 6, 10 years. It's going to be within the next couple of years. I don't believe that if if Citigroup or whoever, BNP, whoever has an infrastructure today is not willing to do some kind of innovation in what they are providing or open up, then someone else going to do it, and people are going to tend to go towards that. So they don't have 5 years, 10 years to do something. Otherwise, they will lose the game. So I don't think we need to wait on the already established players. I think we just need to go ahead, and then we will find a solution. And also in terms of what you're talking about, tokenization is easy. Yeah, it's easy. It's based on a ledger technology. And then basically you have tokenized whatever asset you want to do. You don't need to drive a node from one building to another one. And also when you have built that and going into account to account transfer, instead of having 2 to 3 days of closing and settlement, then you have an instantly closing operating model for stocks and whatever tokenization asset you have in there. That you can actually do today. It's not a problem. It's available, but the education of the regulators are not fully understand yet. And that's also why I think, I don't think this is anything news, but the way you structure and also mining data in terms of providing information for the regulators is something that's going to be huge in the future, not only for educating, of course, but for the regulators also. And because they are not educated in terms of all these new technologies and how you do it, you need to provide them with secure data that they believe in and understand, so they can say, this is how we're doing, and you're going to provide this. And it's a collaboration. It's not because we're going to point our fingers on the regulators. We need to establish a partnerships in terms of providing a future where you can go across borders with the same regulation as you do in Denmark, as you do in Switzerland, as you do in the US.
Thank you. That was initially what we had as part of this on innovation in asset management. So we are about to wrap up. Maybe just one final question, and that is, now we've talked a lot about DLT and tokenization. It's been around actually for a long time now. What would you see sort of being the next new thing? And maybe, Ruptus, would you give just a short insight on what you think?
The next big thing. That is a tough question. I would simply see what we're working on workable in production, and I think additional values will create out of a kickstart somewhere somehow. We are, as we said, Swiss owned, Swiss regulated. Payment is in Switzerland, but look, this is not the center of the universe. People are interested in Euro, in MiFID compliant rules in the US, in the APEC region. This is where the nut is cracked. Is how does this technology overcome borderlines, time zones, and regulatory burdens? That is in itself a big thing. So from a product, I don't know. I don't know if what product will be hyper than the other. I want the infrastructure to work first.
Yeah, makes sense. Omri, would you have any insights on this?
Yes, I'll give a complicated answer, unfortunately. I think that I'm a big believer in decentralized finance and actually changing the infrastructure totally, not incrementally only. I think incrementally is making a lot of sense. And I think what I really love seeing with technologies, new technologies, is when they actually move away from imitating all technologies in a bit more efficient ways to actually producing something completely new. And to give an example of it, we see a lot of growth on what is called today like automated market makers. So now you have liquidity that is provided by everybody easily, and potentially also as a result can also be that the fees will be provided to any liquidity provider from small to big, and they actually operate directly against themselves. I mean, I was involved, I guess in 2016-17 with the first models of that, and we still publish on it mostly academically. But I think these are extremely interesting because they're not imitating old things in a new methodology, but you actually change the rules of the game. And I want to see more of them. In tokenization of assets, this is something else that we talked about as well. So I think, how do we kind of see the futures of liquid markets, and how do we open financial markets to everybody with technologies such as decentralized finance?
Thank you. And Thomas, a last comment? If you have one.
Yeah. I agree with both of my colleagues here in terms of what's going to be incremental for the future. One thing we didn't talk a lot about is one thing is the infrastructure, but how we sell the product is something else.
Yeah.
We need to understand, and going forward as a manager, you need to have the marketing in the core place of what you're doing as a company. How you communicate with customers, and in terms of how you provide liquidity and so forth. That's a main driver.
Thank you so much for all your good input. It has been a pleasure to moderate this session on innovation in the asset management industry. I hope that you will all continue to listen in to the many interesting discussions that's going on today at the Copenhagen FinTech Week. And take care. Bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.